Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. I am Carrie Brown. In today's video, we are going to talk about one of my favorite ways to introduce students to counting collections. We're going to talk about the 5 parts that are included. So, lots of times when you have kindergarten students come to school, they have no idea what counting actually is. With this routine, your students will thrive. But you have to know how to get started and how to do it. So that's what I'm going to share with you today. So if you are ready to hear more, hit that like button, go ahead and subscribe to my channel, and let's get started. So the very first part of counting collections is the introduction. And I know that probably seems kind of silly, like, duh, Carrie, you have to introduce it. But sometimes I think we forget as teachers to actually introduce things. So the very first thing I do with my students is I bring them all to the rug, I sit them down, and I say, hey, today we're going to learn something new. And I tell them it's called counting collections. I have a little tub or bin with a whole bunch of my collections in the inside. And I tell them we're going to practice every day. And when I say every day, it's not actually every day, but I tell them every day because I want them to think it's really something we're going to do. We're going to thrive. We're going to be amazing at it. And we're going to be amazing because we're going to practice. Well, I tell them we're going to start counting. So I grab one of the collections out. I usually put this under the document camera so they can all see it, but they can also just look at where I'm sitting because I'm sitting right next to them on the rug. So I go ahead and I take out whatever I choose. Let's say, for instance, I choose, if it's September, I may choose some apple counters. So I pull out some apples, and then I don't really say anything. I just take them out and kind of start moving them. And then I may have kids, they'll start counting with me. But I kind of dump it out, but I want to see who will pick up on it and who won't without me really saying anything to start with. Well, once I get into that, I'll kind of line them up. I don't tell them they have to line it up. I make sure I don't tell them anything. And I'll say, we're going to count whatever is inside of our collections. And our collections are these little bins. Each of the bins have different things in them. And I just want you to tell me how many it is. So at the very beginning, that's our goal. Just to be able to tell me how many things is in the inside. We will practice doing that a couple of days, and it's with me, so they kind of get the idea of what to do. I'll have them come up and count, but this is all under the document camera, and it's just an introduction every day. And every day I'm saying, remember, we're going to be doing these. Who remember what these are called? And then they should start saying they're called counting collections. So once they've got it in their head that we're doing counting collections and our goal is to count, then I introduce them to their partners. So the reason I do partners is because it's a lot easier for me at the beginning of the school year, especially because it is kindergarten. And I like to make sure I can kind of eyeball everybody and I can check in with everybody. And if I have 18 or over 20 students, that's really hard to check in with everybody. But if I cut 20 students in half, I'm only checking in with 10 groups because counting collections should not take long at all. So I go ahead and I tell them, you're going to get a partner. So then I'll partner them up. If I have someone I know that just cannot count, I'll put them with a child that is pretty strong in counting or is kind of bossy, just because I know they'll kind of help the other child. So I pair them up. Then we talk about our counting spots. Now, I still say this is all part of our introduction. The introduction can go for a week, over a week. It just depends on your students and how comfortable you are doing this. So once they're in pairs, I'll tell them about their spots. We practice going to their spots without anything. And then I'll say, okay, come back to the rug. So I want this to be flawless because eventually we're going to get to a point where I say, all right, go and grab your counting collection box, get with your partner, get started. And then everybody will know what to do. In the very beginning, we do go really slow. And the reason I go slow is because I want them to know exactly what my expectations are. So once we've learned how to go to our spots, come back to the rug, then we'll practice taking the actual collection with us. So then they go with their collection, they go to their counting spot. No one can open it until I say start. And I make sure everybody's in their counting spot, and I'll say, okay, what is your goal? And they'll say to count how many's in our collection, or, whatever verbiage I've given them, because I do change it up every year. So they just repeat to me what their job is and what their goal is, and then we will walk around. Now, I do go over an expectation chart with my students, and the expectation just kind of gives a teacher role and a student role. From the very beginning, I only introduce the teacher part. I leave the student part empty because we're not going over all of that yet, because I haven't introduced a sheet, we're not recording, we're not doing any of that. So they know my job is just to walk around. And it's not to sit down with them, even though I might do that. My job is to walk around and just check in. So as I'm walking around, I may ask questions, I may just observe, I may just listen to them count. There's many different things that I do as they're counting. So they know what my job is, and their job right now is just to count. And then once everybody has their number counted, we'll come back to the rug. They'll tell me how many they had, and we're done. Now, you could avoid going to counting spots because you could do this all on the rug, but it's a lot easier if they're separated out, because it is hard for them to hear themselves count. Once your students know exactly what to do, and this may only take you a week and a half, it shouldn't take too long. And you don't have to do this every day, but in the very beginning, I do like to do it every single day, so they go ahead and get in the routine of doing this. Then let's talk about part number 2. Part number 2 is modeling how to count. So I'll go ahead and I'll make a new chart. I just put this up on our easel or chart paper or whatever you do. You can even just do it on a board. And I'll say, okay, we've been counting for a few days. What are some ways that we can count? And then I might have my students tell me, you can line them up. Now, if some of them have been using cubes, they may have figured out you can make a tower. And by that time, we've talked about doing towers, because I do like an attendance stick and different things that I've done in the past that have been in my math curriculum. So they may have picked up on, if I've got cubes, I can stack them up. So they may say make a stack. They may say dump them out and count. They may say count them back in the box. There's a ton of ways your students will introduce different ways to count. And so I let them tell me, and again, remember, I don't tell them there's a certain way you have to do it. It's whatever way they want to do it, because the end goal is to know how many you counted. So we go ahead and we make a chart of different ways to count. And then I'll start modeling some of their ways. And I'll let them come up and tell me, okay, I want to model counting it with my foot, or I want to model pointing to it, or I want to model dumping it out and counting. And then every day I'll just let one person come up and do it. And that way we're seeing a variety of ways to count. And then when they go to their counting spots, I'm watching the different ways that they are counting. I also ask them, how are you going to count today? Or sometimes when they come back to the rug, I may say, well, how did you all count today? What did you choose to do? And they'll tell me, we lined them up, or we sorted them, and then we counted by colors, especially if they have like teddy bears or something. I've had my kids to sort them out by colors before, and then they'll count all the colors up. It doesn't matter how they do it as long as they're doing it. And then the third step is just counting. So it kind of goes with steps 1 and 2. They kind of all merge together, but your students practice counting all of the different ways. Now, once they've got that down, and this may be into week 2, week 3, again, it just depends on how fast your students pick this up. Then you introduce step number 4. Now, step number 4 is actually recording. Now, I like to use some different recording sheets, and I have different tools that I may add in for them. But again, this is a mini lesson that I do. So I bring them all to the rug. I say, today we're going to have a new part of our counting collection. And, I try to get them all excited, get them riled up. You all have been doing so great counting. Now you're ready for the next step. Now I do them on half sheets of paper just to save paper. And I do the partners. So I use the one with 2 spots for names. I tell them, your very first thing you're going to do, you're going to write your name on it. And I practice writing my name, or may get, 1 or 2 students to come up. Now, the very first day we do this probably does take a little bit longer because it is the beginning of kindergarten, and some of my students have difficulties writing their names. So, we stick with it. They write their name as best as they can, and then I introduce the sheet to them. And I'll grab a counting collection. I'll say, notice on the front of your counting collection, there's a letter. Well, on your paper, there's a box. And in that box, we're going to put that letter. And then I'll practice. So let's say I pulled box S. And I'll say, okay, well, what letter is this? They'll scream out, maybe the right answer, maybe not. And then somebody's going to say S. And I'll say, yes, it's an S. So right here in this little square or in this box, I'm going to write an S. So then I'll know you had the S box. And then once you go to your counting spots, or, if you let them do that at their counting spots, we first start, I make everybody go ahead and put their name so I can kind of watch on the rug. And then I'll have them go ahead and put their letter in. And then I let them go to their counting spots. But later on, they do all of this in their counting spots. So it just depends on where you're at and how much freedom you're giving them. So once they have that, they'll go to their counting spots. And then I'll say, your job is to count. Now, after you count, then you're going to draw. So I'll practice, and usually I may start with something like a counting collection with either 5 or 6, something like that. Not a huge number. And at the beginning of the year, my counting collections don't have that many objects in them. So it's usually small because the goal is to get them down the routine and not so much, oh, I want them to count big numbers, because they have the rest of the year to do that. So let's say if I'm doing the apples, I have 5 apples. We count it together. They tell me there's 5 objects. And then I'll tell them, you don't have to draw apples on your sheet. You can do a box, you can do a line, you can do a circle. I just want it to match. So if you counted 5, then I should see 5 something on your sheet. This saves I don't know how to draw that, or So that saves that, and that cuts that out of the way. So I'll go ahead and I just do some circles. And I'll say, I have 5. And then we count out 5 together. At the very bottom of their sheet, they go ahead and they write how many objects they counted on the line. Y'all, that's it. They finished counting collections. And then step number 5 is a discussion. So I kind of referred to this already, but once they're finished, we come back to the rug and then we have a discussion. They have to tell me how many they counted. I might ask, which way did you count? What did you count? Who did you count with? Just to get them talking about counting. And I love doing this because they start learning how to do number talks. And you guys, this helps them to talk out their numbers, to talk out their math, to talk out their thought process. This helps them for the rest of the year. Those are the 5 steps that I usually start with to introduce counting collections in my classroom. Now, was that everything that I do? Absolutely not. So there will be a part 2 to talk about what all I put in counting collections, the type of skills that you can do in counting collections, and more. So make sure you have subscribed to my channel and that you like this video so you can have more videos like this. All right, friends, I will see you soon in the next video.